Hello, it's your friend Kpopalypse here. I hope you're having a good day. Today's video is about the Kpopalypse origin story. I do get asked from time to time about how I got into K-pop. For those who have met me or who have seen my appearance on live streams, I don't really fit the profile of the average K-pop fan. So it is a point of curiosity for many people, and I kind of get sick of telling the story, so I'm going to put it here so I can that way link people to the video and then they can find out all about it. So here we go. My first encounter with finding out that K-pop was actually a thing was music university. I went to Adelaide University and studied a Bachelor of Music there, and one of my subjects in the Bachelor of Music was ethnomusicology. Ethnomusicology is not a very popular subject for those who are doing a Bachelor of Music, but because I was majoring in composition, it's actually part of the curriculum for me and the other composition students. There was probably about half a dozen of us in our ethnomusicology class. One of our assignments in the ethnomusicology class was to present something to the class on a particular type of music culture. I can't even remember what I did for my presentation. I'm sure it wasn't very good. But I do remember the Korean girl who was in my class and her presentation, which was on K-pop. She was a Korean exchange student who was a very big fan of HOT, and she gave a presentation on K-pop mainly in the context of her view of it as a HOT fangirl. She played us some of HOT's videos and talked at length about the cultural context of why they were singing about the things that they were singing about in the lyrics. She also mentioned that there was another group called SES, but she spent maybe about 5 seconds talking about SES and a good 30 minutes talking about HOT. So, she really liked HOT a lot. So she played us the videos for songs such as We Are the Future and Outside Castle and a few others. And you might be thinking that this is what got me into Korean pop music, but no, this is not how it happened, because I heard these songs and they were really quite bad. What really struck me about them the most was just how incredibly poorly they were produced for what was at that time and arguably still the biggest pop label within Korea. Songs had very poor production quality. Vocals were often fading in and out of the mix a lot, especially during the rap parts where the vocals would just get buried because they didn't have proper compression or oral excitation on the vocal. So you've got this strange wavering voice volume, a bit like the wavering voice volume on this video here. And the songs were just bad, really amateurish, very dated sounding. The pop music that Koreans were making in 1998 sounded like Western pop music from 1988 made by people who didn't know how to use the equipment. It was actually quite terrible, and to this day I still don't like HOT at all. But what the talk did do is it had one very positive thing for my appreciation of K-pop, which was that it made me aware that it was a thing that existed, and I just sort of filed that away in my memory bank and thought, okay, maybe this will get good one day. It's certainly not good at the moment if this is the best we've got. For the next decade, I did not run into Korean pop music at all. In Australia in the 2000s, K-pop music was something that was quite easy to not come across casually unless you were specifically seeking it out. What really changed all that was when I was on tour with a band and I stumbled across Melbourne's Media Asia store. There used to be in Melbourne and Sydney and maybe Brisbane, I'm not sure, a physical CD store called Media Asia. They would have CDs, DVDs, etc. from various Asian countries. I'd never encountered this before, but it was a record shop, and when I go on tour, I like to look at record shops, so I thought, well, let's go into Media Asia and see what they got. I went in there and was very struck by all the posters of Girls' Generation. This place had Girls' Generation posters all over the place. Just from looking at the posters, the quantity of them as well as the quality of them, you could tell that this was a group that was absolutely huge, but I'd never heard of them before. So this got me curious. I was like, okay, who's this absolutely massive group that I've never heard of? Why don't I know about this? Because, I was someone who knew about music from all places in the world. Why hadn't I heard of Girls' Generation? What was wrong with me? I better check this out. So I bought a DVD of Girls' Generation that had some live footage on it as well as some of their music videos and took it home. and then promptly forgot about it for another couple of months before I finally put it in my DVD player. When I finally got around to putting the DVD in and pressing play, I was really impressed. K-pop had come a long way. The songs were actually produced quite well. They were actually good songs with good melodies. It was actually refreshing to hear pop music that had a very strong melodic focus, which a lot of Western pop music at that time definitely didn't have. So this was sort of harking back to the era of 80s pop music a little bit in terms of having the melody at the forefront and being what makes a song work, as opposed to rhythmic elements or rapping, which aren't necessarily a bad thing, but the Western market was very oversaturated with that at that particular moment. So it did feel like a breath of fresh air. There was a bit of weird cutesiness to some of it, which I didn't really like all that much, but the songs were good enough that you could look past it. The main song of Girls' Generations that was out at that time was Run Devil Run, and the posters that I saw in the store were probably promoting that song. And that was a good song. That was at least as good as the Western equivalents. Other songs were even better. G was really good. O was very, very good. So was Chocolate Love. So was Mr. Taxi. There were some other sort of mid-ballads on there and things like that. But generally speaking, it was a compilation of songs that were like mainly the feature tracks, and it was putting Girls' Generation's best foot forward. It was all their really well-known songs. They also had Into the New World and their self-titled song on there. All the early songs that Girls' Generation fans like. And they are good songs for the most part. So I was impressed. It certainly made me want to pay attention to K-pop a little bit more. And I started investigating further. The next group that I found out about was Tiara. And they had songs that were even better than Girls' Generation on average, at least in terms of the feature tracks. And this also sent me on a trip down the YouTube rabbit hole of K-pop videos. At the time I was working at a radio station as well, and I thought a good way to find out about more groups would be to start a Korean pop radio show. So I pitched that to the people at the radio station. They said yes, and I started doing a radio show and finding more and more and more groups. What I discovered was that a lot of the groups actually weren't all that great. Often the singles were quite good, but as soon as you sort of got stuck into an album with the songs, you'd always find syrupy ballads and just lame, soft stuff. I mean, before getting into K-pop, I was a metalhead. I was listening to metal and punk and industrial music, stuff like that. And I still do. And I like music that sounds, I guess, extreme. If I'm listening to metal, I want the metal to be really heavy. Likewise, if I'm listening to rap music, which I also like, I like it to be really extreme and hardcore. I don't like soft rap. Same with K-pop. If I'm listening to a K-pop song that's kind of happy, I want it to be as happy as possible. I like it when music goes the extra mile. And K-pop, when it does go the extra mile, does a very good job of it. Girls' Generation's G is probably a really good example of turning the Aegyo up to 11, right? So that's cool. I think that's a good thing, rather than being mediocre. After a while of doing the radio show, it's probably about mid-2012, I discovered a fair bit of the music at this point. And my favourite song at the time would have been Tiara's Roly Poly, and it's still an amazing song. Really simple, really catchy, really good. And I did a couple of club DJ nights where I put Roly Poly on the sound system, and I had the whole room doing the hand dance. It was cool. And then something happened around sort of July 2012, which fans of Tiara will know about very well, which was they had that whole sort of bullying controversy, which really wasn't. It was all fairly obviously fake, I thought, right from the word go. I was calling it out as, no, this isn't right. There's obviously something wrong with this. It can't be real. But everyone fell for it, which is amazing. A very brief recap of the story for those of you who might be checking this out who aren't deep down the K-pop rabbit hole yet. Tiara were accused of bullying a certain member of the group out of the group, and their label were very slow to respond to the accusations, and in that intervening time of a few days where they were slow to respond, fans sort of concocted their own theories and pieced together out of context bits of video to try and prove that Tiara were bullying this member. And it wasn't true, but, you know, people are gullible on the internet and they believe what they want to believe. And since school bullying is such a hot topic for young people, especially in Korea, but also elsewhere, it was enough to get the group basically cancelled in the court of online Korean pop fan opinion. it didn't have quite such an impact commercially. Tiara were quite successful for many years after the incident, but they certainly ceased being a group that people would admit to liking. I became very frustrated by it because people who I'd seen at the club dancing to the song were suddenly didn't want anything to do with the group, and they didn't like it. They said like, "Oh, I can't listen to Tiara anymore." I'm like, "Why not?" And they're like, "Well, because of this bullying thing." And I'm like, "Well, that's probably not even real, dude. You don't even know." This seemed really weird to me because, I'm into like metal and punk and all sorts of other stuff. And I was listening to people who are known for defecating on stage or burning down churches or killing people or whatever. And, and I still listen to their music. So I found it funny that this pop group had been cancelled for something that, even if it was true, even if they did do all those things that the fans said they did, it's still a drop in the bucket compared to the things that the other groups outside of K-pop that I was already listening to had done and were doing. So I felt kind of frustrated by this and I wanted to express it, but I didn't want to express it within the radio show that I already had. Every minute that I spend talking about some lame controversy is a minute that I'm not playing music, and the show's only an hour long. So I want to fit as much cool music in that show as I possibly can. So I thought, well, I need somewhere else to let this out. And at that time, I was also checking out, other people's websites. I was aware that there were websites and forums that I could go to and express myself about and talk about this with fans, but I found that was very difficult to do because, a lot of the fans were drinking the Kool-Aid and they would just believe whatever the other fans in Korea were saying without question. So I was definitely in the minority. So I wanted somewhere to express myself freely without having to worry about, if someone disagrees with me or whatever. So I thought, well, I might as well just start my own website and put all the things that don't fit into the radio show into the website and start talking about, the things that I think are interesting, or if something comes up, I can talk about it and so on. I didn't want to talk about it in the way that other people were doing though, because I never did write a complete sort of Tiara debunk style post. There were already other ones out there. So, but what I did do instead is I thought, well, why don't I just sort of go to the source, and rather than addressing each controversy one by one, why don't I just talk about how K-pop fans think and how the music world works and how those things sort of combine. And that was the first content on the website. And also trying to make it funny as well, because, I don't want to read something boring. So many other websites were trying to tackle these sort of issues, but they were all doing it in a very serious sort of ranting kind of way, and I didn't want to do that because I find that really uncomfortable to read. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy listening to someone else be angry. I'm not an angry person, and I don't like listening to other angry people either. So I thought, no, instead I'm going to make it funny. I'm going to use humour. And so that's what the website is in its inception, was trying to tackle all those sort of things with humour. And as it's gone on, it's changed a little bit. It covers various other things, lots of music reviews is probably the main thing people use it for these days. Maybe some other things too, I don't know. But anyway, that's the Kpopalypse origin story. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.